Okay.
Okay, so we are live now. Hi guys out there, welcome to the discussion. We will be starting our great poll discussion in 2 minutes. So go grab a glass of wine or coffee and get ready for some interesting talk. This is water, by the way.
I don't believe you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're 1 minute away from starting. Okay, so it's just hit 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, so we are going to get started. Firstly, my name is Shane. I am representing United Pole Artists today, and we have Anne-Marie as well joining us, who will be moderating the conversation. This is a discussion for all the viewers and our guests and our contributors. Thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. And thank you to our contributors and guest speakers on the panel today. We are really happy to be able to provide you, the viewers and the panelists, with this platform to discuss topics within our industry. So you should see a comment box to the right of the video box. This is where you are able to post questions or comments. You can post a question directly to one of the panelists, or you can make general comments. Just some housekeeping rules. We encourage opinions, we encourage discussion. With that said, we won't tolerate any vulgar language, name-calling, shaming. If you wish to express your opinion, please do so in a civilized manner. So today, the hot topics in the pole industry are discrimination towards sex workers and adult entertainers within pole competitions, and the ongoing debate of children and pole dancing. So on our panel today, we have 4 brilliant people. We have Philip Deal, Lux ATL, Colleen Jolly, and Jennifer Lee. So how this is going to work is each panelist will get about 5 minutes to discuss their said issue and topic. We will then open it up to questions at the end of it, and then we'll move on to the next panelist after that. At the end of all the panelists, if you have any further questions or comments at all, please feel free to write them. Also, this will be available after we end on the YouTube link as well, so feel free to revisit it or share it with anyone. So first we are going to start off with Philip Deal, who recently sparked a conversational topic in a live video on Facebook calling out a particular event regarding discrimination. So we welcome Philip, and let's get started. Thanks, Philip.
Hi, thank you. And I want to thank Anne-Marie, Shane, for inviting me to be a part of this. I also want to thank all of my fans and friends on Facebook who have been so supportive. I think generally all of us can agree that discriminating against a person because of their job is wrong. We can all disagree about that, but I want to talk about something more than that because I think people thought that I would be talking specifically about that video or that particular situation. And I think it's important that that video just cracked open a much larger discussion. And we need to really start focusing on what the root cause is for these kinds of rules. Now, given these rules have been around since the foundation of pole competitions, 5-6 years ago, when there were large pole competitions holding their thing, they set down rules that you couldn't be an adult entertainer or a stripper. Some are just for adult entertainers. And I think a lot of competitions that rose up after that basically just copied and pasted those rules or those bylaws, and it just kind of was systemic. It was just something that we all accepted. And what we really need to think about is this is really internalized misogyny. We want to get to the root cause of what this is, that we divide ourselves into them and us. And so it's the same thing with internalized homophobia. Now, internalized misogyny and misogyny is exactly the reason why men can't be effeminate or men can't be feminine. Internalized homophobia, even within the LGBT community, there is this idea that you have to behave a certain way. So you can be gay, just can't be too gay. You can't be over the top feminine. You can't be a flaming homosexual, but it's okay to be gay. It's the same thing like in the African American community. You can be black, but you can't be too black. And so there's another rule that's currently in pole competition rules that I don't think any of us think about very much, and truly I haven't thought about either. And I needed to go back and check this out. I'm not going to talk about any individual, nor am I going to talk about any particular competition, because people can do the research on their own. But did you know that there's a rule in some pole competitions that if you get accepted to be a competitor, that you must be forced to compete in the gender of your birth? So that means if you are a woman, trans person who transitioned to be a male, or if you're a male who transitioned to be a female, that there are certain competitions that would enforce that you have to compete in the gender of your birth. Misogyny, right? This is a much bigger issue. It's like saying women like Nadia Sharif or women like Saja Lee aren't strong enough to compete against somebody who was born male, or that a female who made the transition to be male isn't strong enough to compete against Shawn Michael or Acro. It's a much larger issue, and these are the topics that we should be talking about. Whether or not a sex worker can be allowed into a competition or not, it's a much broader, bigger problem, and it really stems back to respect, and respecting people for their choices, respecting people for who they are, not shaming people for who they are, and more importantly that, bullying. And I feel that this kind of behavior and these kinds of rules are an act of bullying. And if we, as a pole community and a pole industry, really want to set up the standard for the world as how we should treat one another, we should start talking about these issues now. And again, I want to say I'm ashamed of myself as someone in the LGBT community who also has been an activist, that when I read through and I saw that rule, I read over it and said, well, that's not me. And I didn't even think about how it affects another person. And that's where social responsibility comes in, because most people think that if something's happening and it doesn't affect them, Black Lives Matter, they're not socially responsible to comment on it or even to try to understand where another person's coming from. That today is the issue that I want to raise.
Okay, thank you, Philip, for raising those discussion topics. It's something that will give a lot of people a lot of thought. Just reminding you viewers out there as well, please join the conversation and post questions or comments, or just listen and absorb everything that you can. So let's move on to Lux ATL. A lot of people know Lux on Facebook. She's a mother, a brilliant pole dancer, and also holds a PhD in American literature and culture with a scholarly focus on race and gender in America. And Lux recently released a newsletter about discrimination within our industry that became very thought-provoking for a lot of people. So I am going to hand over the floor to Lux. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
Go ahead, Lux.
Thanks for having me, guys. Okay, so let me just start off by saying the reason that I'm here and the reason that I'm in this conversation is because this topic reflects my life's work as a feminist and as a activist for sex workers. I think that any sort of personal beef or team this person, team that person, or even really considering too deeply specific competitions is the short game, and I want to think more long game here, okay, bigger picture. So first thing I want to say, the first point I want to make is I really would like to reframe the discussion. I think a lot of people are caught up in a miscommunication that is not really reflective of the issue at hand. First confusion at hand that I'm seeing is we're having a lot of talk about rights. I don't want to talk so much about people's rights as I want to talk about what is right. So let me be clear with what I'm saying here. A lot of things that I'm hearing in defense of the ban of sex workers from competitions is that it is any competition's right to make the rules that they choose. I agree. I agree completely. That is not under dispute. So using that as the answer to this question is an evasion. My question is not whether you have the right to make these rules, but instead whether this rule is right. What purpose does this rule serve? So I do want to make something clear for the particular competition that incited the controversy recently. I have on good authority that strippers are actually allowed, but not pornographers. There is some distinction there. However, regardless of that distinction, I find that distinction to be hair-splitting anyways. It is hair-splitting and an unimportant distinction. That's sex worker hierarchy and respectability politics. What I want to question is, why are people who do porn, for example, explicitly delineated way up top in the rules in pole competitions? And I think we know why, because like Philip said, this is pole history. This rule has existed forever, and I think originally it was under the guise of protecting amateurs from like professional pole dancers, aka strippers, which of course doesn't hold water, but anywho, the rule has continued and been replicated over and over, and we just accept it without interrogating what purpose does that really serve? Why do we have this rule? What are we using this rule to say about ourselves? So my friends, you see, this argument is also not about two sides. That's another thing that people get confused. They think it is an argument about pole should be stripperish. No, pole ought to be fungies and sorry, I almost cussed. I'm not gonna cuss. It's hard for me. Pole ought to be fungies and stuff all the time. This is not an argument about what pole should be. Friends, I encourage your fungies and your acrobatics. I encourage it and I love it. I don't need to own pole. It's not about that. This isn't about two sides arguing over who owns pole. This isn't about two sides. This is about one injustice, and that is the still happening discrimination of sex workers in this industry. I've heard some people say it's not discrimination because sex work is a choice. Well, let me throw an analogy at you. Motherhood is a choice as well, right? What if we had a rule that said no mothers, competitor may not be a mother? Unacceptable, an outrage. People would be up in arms, and they would be right to be up in arms. But you see, we are so used to marginalizing sex workers and assuming that a sex worker is the lowest, crappiest thing that you can be, that a rule like that doesn't even cause pause. Except if you actually are someone like me. And that means that I am the person you are banning. But for me, I've never been a competitor ever in my life. Those kind of rules don't bother me on a personal level. They do bother me in the culturally driven prejudice that they reinforce. I do want to let everybody know that the notion that being a sex worker, that the notion that if you have nudie shots on the internet, that is a bad choice that you made in your life, or that is something that you should be ashamed of, that you suck now, I want to let you know that is culturally specific. It is historically specific. It is not objective truth. It is very American, and it is very Puritan. The whole world don't think this way, people. And you don't have to either. Once again, I would like to clarify that this ain't about who invented pole or who owns pole. It's not about that. Everybody. There is room for all of us, you see. But there are no competitions that are banning pole fitness people. There are competitions that I can't even enter in the pole world. Like, what? I can't enter a pole competition? This is my life. Now that's crazy to me. And all that I have to say on that is the explicit discrimination of already marginalized sex workers, particularly in an industry founded largely by sex workers, is unacceptable. Now, you can agree and propagate the narrative that says that you need to hide people like me, and you can gain personal success through that route, but you will never affect larger cultural change by smiling and nodding to these narratives. So basically the question is, for me, is, are you down for the revolution or not? Okay, that's all I have to say on that. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Lux. We learnt a lot from that, I think, and I hope everyone sees this as a positive, thought-provoking discussion. What we are going to do is move on next to the kids in pole situation. People have asked us why we have tied these two topics together. Both of them are completely separate, but they are all in one as well. It all comes back down to our industry. Are we sexually exploiting children? Are we not doing enough for strippers? Are we doing too much for strippers? So all in all, the two topics do somewhat go hand in hand. Before we start with Colleen, I did want to read out a statement. The Industry Person of the Year and CEO of Bad Kitty, Jack Gaffney, unfortunately couldn't make this call today, but Jack has written to us and he would like us to read out his thoughts on that, so I will go ahead now. From Jack, kids, tough one in my opinion, is that pole is incredibly therapeutic for adult women. It's an escape, and in many cases, an escape from kids, husbands, work, etc. A big draw is the freeing and safe environment to explore their sexuality while getting in shape and making new like-minded friends. Pole studios are somewhat girls' clubs in many ways. Including kids in the mix takes away from all of that. On top of that, kids have 9 million options and the world caters to them every step of the way. I think it's important for adult women to have their sanctuary. I also feel that pole should not lose its sexy side nor shed its stripper roots. I feel confident as an industry we can sell that to the masses for adult women to make their own decisions. You put kids in the mix and we have to lose that side. We will never get any respect and it will damage the industry. Maybe in 10 to 15 years, if we can get more of a mainstream acceptance for pole and the various attributes of pole, we can then have kids. Crawl before we walk, walk before we run, from Jack. So that's some of his thoughts in regards to it. As you know, Jack has been involved in the industry for many years and has seen this topic come around quite often. So on that, we are going to hand it over to Colleen Jolly. Colleen is the owner of the fabulous International Pole Convention. That tickets are on sale now, everyone, so go buy them. She's also the owner of Pole Pressure Studio and holds kids classes at her studio. So we are going to open it up to Colleen, and she is going to discuss the topic of children in pole. So thank you, Colleen, for joining us.
Thank you. And just to clarify, I do run Pole Convention, and I appreciate that plug. I have unfortunately closed my studio. I do still teach, and while I don't teach official pole classes, I have taught children in an unofficial capacity, which I am going to talk about in just a second. So as far as I know, Pole Convention, or PoleCon for short, we are the only large-scale pole event outside of some competitions that allows kids to participate. Originally, the reason we allowed kids to participate was really to help out a single mom. Just before PoleCon 2015, I was contacted by a single mother who had a young son. She had no one to watch him, and she wanted to be able to participate in PoleCon. So having been a child in a single-parent household, I said, of course I can help you. And we made the junior attendee pass to cover some of the food costs associated, since we do feed everyone at PoleCon. So ages 5 to 17 can come to PoleCon for a discounted rate. Under 5, thinking more that toddler, perhaps breast or bottle feeding age, need to be with their moms, could come for free. Created this and didn't really think much of it. After we had established the pass, we worked with a competition that did have a separately ticketed event on the PoleCon stage, and they had a kids division. I believe they had 2 under 18 girls competing, and then a couple of children came with the organizers as well. So overall, we had 3 to 4 people, 3 to 4 kids who wound up coming to PoleCon, and one of them did wind up taking some pole workshops, and she is the adorable and amazing little dancer who is in our marketing for our junior attendee pass. Now, while all this was going on, we talked to sponsors, because sponsors is how a lot of things get done in the pole community. Most of PoleCon is self-funded by both my own previous businesses as well as by you all from purchasing tickets and workshops. However, we need advertisers and exhibitors and sponsors just like every pole event. And one of the sponsors that we were talking to specifically said they would not be a part of PoleCon 2015 because we did have a kids pass. And I thought about this, again, knowing that we only had a few folks who were going to participate as kids, if this was something that I wanted to continue doing, which potentially I could have made more money to support the event through having this sponsor. You never know. Sponsors make all sorts of requirements and expectations because they need to do things that make sense for their brand. Ultimately, I decided to keep the junior attendee pass and not have this particular company involved because for me it's important that all members of the pole community who want to be a part of this community have a space that they can attend, grow, learn, and share. And to me, that doesn't matter what gender you are, what style of pole you come from, what your career is, if you are a disabled dancer or a fully able dancer, if you are at various activity levels, and of course, at all different ages. So for me, it was more important to have that than to have an additional sponsor. Now, everyone is going to make different decisions in life, and this is one that I made. Now, it's important to note that I don't have kids. I'm not a mom. I have 2 furry kids, but that's not really the same thing. I have, however, taught children in an unofficial capacity. I have taught kids at an outdoor festival, which we held a stage pole in a marketing booth when I did have my studio, and we had tons of kids of all ages running up to try pole. Now, some parents thought this was the best thing ever, and some parents made some less than appropriate comments. Most of them, when they did allow their kids to come up to the pole, were amazed not only at their kids' athleticism, but also in the joy that they had. For kids, it's just some monkey bars or a jungle gym. There's absolutely no other connotation to it other than it's something fun. I've had friends who have kids come visit me, and I have a pole in my home, and I've taught their children under the watchful eyes of their parents. Now, in terms of parents and kids and pole, parents have to make the decision that's best for them. And their decisions for their family are going to involve everything from budgets, time constraints. There are lots and lots of options and things for kids to do. I think there's some kids in my neighborhood that are in a million different activities. It's hard to keep track of. So parents really should be making the decision that's best for them. Now, I believe that all styles can exist in pole for all of the members of our community that want to be there. And I believe that the important thing we should be debating is not whom we should allow into our community or what is appropriate for a given element of our potential community, but we should be focusing on education. We should be focusing on educating our teachers, our studio owners, to make sure that when these people do come and try a class, that we are prepared to teach kids, that we are prepared to teach senior folks, that we are prepared to teach people of different activity levels, different strength levels. Because if we teach them safely and they have a great time, then they'll come back and they'll keep adding their uniqueness to our amazing community, and our community will be evolved to continue evolving organically the way that it has, bringing all of these different elements. Now, in terms of the sexualization of kids, I know that's definitely a concern. I saw a lot of the news reports coming out of the UK, and I would say that historically, there are tons of dance styles that have sexual origins that are currently taught to children. Things like belly dancing, tango, flamenco, salsa, hip-hop, tons and tons of dance styles that have sexual origins that are taught to children. If you turn on the TV show Dance Moms, it's a reality show, those kids wear exactly the same thing that we wear in pole class. They have shorts and they have sports bras. And some of their competitor outfits might be a little racy, depending on exactly your definition of what racy might mean. So I think there is a way that we can teach kids in a safe environment, and I think we are best served by continuing to educate ourselves internally on how best to serve different communities, focus on supporting the teachers, supporting the studio owners, supporting all of the various products and necessary services that support our industry, helping us all learn and grow, not just in physical natures, but also in how to grow our business and become a lasting professional place for everyone to interpret in whatever way they want, and then spend our energy showing the rest of the world that you can take this little tiny apparatus and do a million different things with it. And then I think we will still have those sanctuaries for women away from their husbands and away from their children, away from their jobs, where they can have that time, whether that's in specialized studios that will crop up, specialized classes, or other ways that we will see the industry continue to grow. So by having all people involved, I think we will have a richer, more diverse, and ultimately a larger community to share, to grow, and to learn.
All right, thank you, Colleen. That's a lot of great insight into to actually losing a sponsor due to having children in a pole competition. So thank you so much for your insight. Just to let you guys know, we are receiving your comments and questions. Some of them are delayed, and we had started with the next speaker. So what we are going to do is address all of the comments and questions at the end of this discussion. So our next speaker, who is a surprise speaker that joined us at the last minute, is Jennifer Lee. Now bear with me because she's got a lot of credentials that I need to read out. Jennifer is the founder of Vertical Exploration Foundation, a 501c3 dedicated to facilitating, promoting, and publishing research on pole and aerial. She is also a senior editor of Vertical Exploration, a journal of pole and aerial movement studies. Additionally, she has a PhD in religion and science and focused her dissertation on trauma recovery and, I can't even say this word, so I'm not even going to try, construction after that word. She's also a fully licensed psychotherapist in a private practice in Chicago and teaches contemporary poleography at Chicago Academy of Pole and Dance. So the reason we have brought Jennifer in this conversation is there was a psychologist quoted within all the articles you've all seen go around about the kids in pole, and Jennifer would like to offer her expertise within the field of pole dancing. So welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to join this panel. I really appreciate and honor everybody's work that they do. And I have oh good, my feedback stopped. Okay, now I can think. Yeah, I wanted to join the conversation particularly around some of the concerns around sexuality and sexualization and how that can impact kids, but also how that impacts women. One of the first things I want to say is, as a therapist and dancer and researcher, in order for us to be whole people, we have to engage all the dimensions of ourselves. That's our body, our cognition, our emotions, our sexuality. A lot of times people tend to think that human sexuality kind of starts at puberty. But anyone who's ever raised a kid or has a toddler knows that that's not true. Healthy human sexual development is a lifelong process. And there's a really important distinction between healthy sexual development, which really honors the subjective experience and perspective of people, and sexualization, which by definition is the objectification of a person and values them only for the ways in which they are sexual. And I think this distinction is really important because in a lot of the conversation that's been happening over the past week, adults have looked at movement of children and have from the outside said this is detrimental sexualization of the children. But in most of these conversations, we haven't heard anything about the experience of the young pollers themselves. So in all of these conversations, the adults who are naming children as being sexualized are in fact the people who are sexualizing the movements of these children. In response to that, Vertical Exploration has recently put up a survey with the intent of hearing from our young pollers. The reality is that at this point, there is zero research that has been done on the impact of participating in pole dance, in children's participation in pole dance, and how that impacts their development. There's zero that has been done, other than the handful of responses that I've gotten in the past 2 or 3 days. And so when we make a case as a pole authority to say that beyond our own personal experiences, but also our detractors don't have any research that they have to back it up. So this is partially my really big push. If you teach kids, if you have kids classes at your studios, if you're a parent of a young poller, go to verticalexplorationfoundation.com, hit polling on poll, and there's a survey that your kids can take. In terms of the sexualization of children, in 2007, the American Psychological Association released a study on, I have the title, The Sexualization of Girls, Sexualization of Girls is Linked to Common Mental Health Problems in Girls and Women, including eating disorders, low self-esteem, and depression. They make a really good case that sexualization happens at a variety of dimensions in our cultures, in our families, in our internalized ways in which we have experienced sexualization. There are a lot of bad repercussions that come from sexualization. What is interesting in some of the very early studies that I've gotten back from our young pollers is actually they are all rating very high on self-esteem. They are rating very high on body image and confidence. And when asked what is most valuable to them in engaging in poll, sexy, which people are saying, oh, we're telling kids they have to be sexy. Sexy, actually, being sexy is among the lowest rated value that some of our younger pollers are putting on there. They're rating much higher strength, confidence, flexibility, creativity, and those are all very, very healthy psychological signs of good growth and development. There's a lot more that I could say about this, but I also want to be sensitive to time. So my plug is let's keep having conversations about this. Please go fill out the survey so that as a community, when we have people coming on news media programs and saying, oh, this is bad, you're teaching our kids to be all sorts of things, we actually have the voices of some of our young pollers to say, no, actually, their experience of this exercise and participation is really good. I will share the link with Anne-Marie. It's also already up at We Are UPA Facebook page, and it's also on the Vertical Exploration Foundation Facebook page. So let's get research and authority and support our kids and reinforce and mirror the good experiences that they are having in their bodies and with their confidence in whatever activities they choose to participate in, including pole. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Jen. That's some really insightful discussion there, and we will share the link on the United Pole Artists Facebook page as well after this video discussion. So please feel free to go onto that. I have some questions here. The first one, which is, we've had a few of these, and it's directed at Philip. So Philip, a few people have asked, what, if anything, do you have to say to the people who feel like you may have been a bully recently with the name calling, etc., over social media?
I don't regret anything I said. I think that maybe my delivery sometimes my choice of words aren't great. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. My feed cut out. I had to come back to the chat. I feel that my delivery style might not be great, but the spirit and the points that I was trying to make were clear. And as far as the bullying is concerned, it might have come across as a form of bullying, but at the same time, the person who was bullied and really dragged through the mud and publicly slut-shamed and attacked initially was myself. So, I mean, you can look at it from both sides. I felt attacked, I felt bullied, I felt injured, harmed, and my reputation was damaged at times. And so, no, if people don't like what I have to say, they don't have to listen to me. And that's just kind of how I feel.
Okay. Thank you, Philip, for clearing that up. A few comments directed about different topics from Dawn Humphrey. Perfect example about Anne-Marie Davies at PolCon. Having it shoved down our throats is okay. Perhaps this is why it's questionable to have sex workers perform. There is a time and a place. And this is more directed at Lux as well, because the fitness craze is not being shoved down our faces. So Lux, do you have any comment to what Dawn Humphreys is addressing?
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm completely understanding, but let me make sure I am understanding.
I will clarify this for you, Lux. Last year at
Oh, no. I know what happened.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. So is the danger here if we allow the sex workers into the competitions that we're going to make your pole shows too depraved and too sexy and too stripperish? I'll put it to you this way. If the person who can enter a pole competition and win and kill it has 18 videos of them performing oral sex available on the internet, they still won the competition. And that, my friends, is the face of the industry. What can I say? I think that the notion that we need to ban sex workers like myself, like many others that I won't name, but the foremothers of the industry, from competitions. Let's just say if you were banning sex workers from competitions in the fear that they would be depraved, then all of these people who have inspired you and moved you and caused these thousands of fans to join together, you would have never seen them. That's what I have to say.
Another quick thing on that topic as well, and then I'm going to take this over to Colleen on what she experienced with this. But how do you feel that the competition bans the sex workers, but some of the judges have been previous sex workers or within the adult entertainment industry?
Who was that question addressed to?
To Lux and to Philip, both of you, sorry, it must have cut out, that in said competitions where sex or adult entertainers are banned, but some judges that are currently judging the competition are current or previous sex workers. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's fair. Colleen made some really amazing points, even though she's talking about the children and she's talking about attending pole conventions and studio classes, is that this is a very large and diverse community full of many different kinds of people, and there are proper venues everywhere. I wanted to mention something about that last comment about pushing sex into people's face. Who's pushing anything into anybody's face? Who's pushing sexy stripper style or sex workers or nudity or pasties or any of this? Who's forcing you to watch or consume any of this material? If you choose to friend somebody on Facebook who endorses stripper style, then you're going to see stripper style stuff in your feed. Unfriend them. If you don't want your children being around or seeing any kind of pole dancing that's sexy, then don't let them watch it. But what's so hypocritical about it is that these same people who want to complain about people who are sex workers being in their pole competitions allow their kids go to see Deadpool, where they see nothing but gore and violence and people getting shot and raped and killed. And the amount of violence that's on television, the amount of violence that kids see on the news is traumatizing. So the least thing that anyone should be worried about is seeing a woman dance sensually around a pole. That's the first thing. No one's forcing you to watch this kind of behavior if you choose not to watch it. The next thing is it just about the whole ex-strippers being on panels for judges? It's just more of the same. It's more of the same, more of the same, more of the same. It's discrimination. It's us versus them, and it's internalized misogyny.
Okay, thanks for that, Philip. Also, Colleen, sort of flowing on from this conversation, we've got a comment from Derek Pearson. What about AMD at Pole Convention? God, AMD, you went well. Everyone's talking about you. What about her performing topless in front of children that were there to compete, like Paige? We are asking about performing exposed in front of the children at Pole Convention. Colleen, can you just explain what happened in that situation, please?
Sure, and thank you for bringing this up, Derek. So I look at PoleCon holistically, and we look to represent all of the many different styles in pole dancing. And last year, the Sexy Showcase was one of the styles that we had represented. So I organize all of the different performers into stylistic showcases. Before the Sexy Showcase, we had some nudity in the Sexy Showcase, not just by Anne-Marie, who did a beautiful performance and shared her time with us, but by two other performers as well. We made not only announcements during the showcase that there would be potentially some nudity, I also personally spoke to the parents of all of the children in attendance, and I said specifically that there would be nudity, not chance of nudity, not partial nudity. There were going to be some nudity, and if they would not like their children to see this, then they should not be in attendance at the Sexy Showcase, which was clearly marked in the program. The parents, particularly, you're mentioning Paige by name, she was one of the, certainly I believe the only junior attendee who did take any workshops at PoleCon. I did speak to her mother particularly, and her mother said that Paige was very understanding of what was going on, that Paige understood that where pole had come from, understood that there were going to be people who made comments about her involvement, and in fact that Paige, I believe she was, I'm not sure if she's 9, 10, or 11 right now, but she's in that 9 to 11 range, that Paige had certainly a level of understanding. I'm not a child psychologist, so I'm not going to say what a child can understand or not. I'm certainly not going to say whether it's appropriate for a child to see another person's boobies in any particular scenario. What I am going to say is that the parents were specifically notified, and that they chose not to remove their children is the parents' option. Now, in terms of nudity at events, we were in New Orleans, which is a place that has a certainly much more lax set of regulations than other places, and we were allowed by the hotel to have some of this nudity. In our next, in PoleCon 2016, we will be in Fort Worth, Texas, and the Fort Worth Convention Center has specifically told us we cannot have any nudity. So I said, great, thank you for letting me know. I will make sure that all of my performers who have already received their performer emails are still accepting submissions, get them in now, that they know that there is no nudity whatsoever. Rules of the convention center, we can be fined, and please don't make me be fined. So we also, after PollCon, sent out a survey asking several questions about poll convention so that we could continue to improve, because we want this to be a reflection of the entire community. And we received 2 comments about having children at the Sexy Showcase. I again presume that these were not the parents, so I know they were not your kids, Derek. I presume these were from other people who are not the parents of the children who had a concern. I respect everyone's concern. They perhaps did not know I spoke to the parents. Perhaps they don't judge that parent's decision as valid. So we have now also moved the Sexy Showcase to be a separate evening event. So that way it is completely separate. There is no, I was accidentally walking through the vendor area at 2 p.m. and saw something I was not expecting. So in terms of that comment about perhaps shoving things down people's throats, particularly talking from my experience at PollCon in our showcases, we want to make sure that we are representing accurately that element of the industry. So sexy, I certainly think stripper style is appropriate for the Sexy Showcase. We did also have 2 different showcases of champions that represented 2 different competitions. So we saw those styles. In our Men of Pole showcase, we saw quite a variety of things, from men literally in 3-piece suits to men wearing high heels to a woman who was dressed as a man to participate in our Men of Pole. So I'm sorry if you were offended. However, the children, particularly the children in question, were under the guidance of their particular parents, and we have made some additional updates to the way that we handle these things to both be as authentic to our Sexy Showcase members and to be as responsive to people who are concerned that we do have children at an event which involves a poll.
Okay, thank you, Colleen, for explaining that situation. I'm sure a lot of people actually didn't know what went on behind the scenes with you addressing this issue prior to it happening and after it happening. So thank you for clarifying that. Just a quick note before I go on with some other questions and comments. I believe Jen needs to go because she has to see a client in the next 10 minutes. So we would really like to thank Jen for her time and participation in this discussion. And if you do have any questions for Jen at all, please feel free to contact her or send it through to United Pole Artists, and we'll make sure that we get the questions on to her. So thank you, Jen, for participating, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
So there's another comment here from BNINE Alua. It's a rule, yes. That competition is her competition. Everyone can make their own competition and make that their own rules. I am quite sad that you did not have that. You did not have a person that understands why the competitions is what it is. It is that way because of her bigger picture goals, nothing to do with discrimination. I'm actually going to address this. We have reached out a few times to the competition organizer and also invited that person onto this live panel as well. We saw that she read the messages but did not respond to say no, she didn't want to, or yes, she would love to come on here. So there was the opportunity for the competition organizer to express her views on this, but we have not had anything from them as yet. And I think Lux actually brought up this one of these comments saying the competition is hers and they can make their own rules, etc. like that. Lux, I feel like you've already addressed this situation, so I think we'll just move on from there unless you do have something else to add on top of that.
No, I mean, once again, no one questions anyone's right to make rules. The
Yeah.
question is what do we think of the content of this rule?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. We are going to wrap up shortly, so I'm just going to get through these. So Benjamin Cameron Hunt, hi Ben. Some of the pole studios I have driven to in my travels do not allow men, or have only 1 or 2 classes that allow men. Yes, I have heard of this a lot as well. Would any of the panelists like to, it's not directed at anyone, so would anyone like to comment on this? Maybe Philip, being a man, how would you like to address this?
Well, I don't know if people know that much about my background. I've been in the pole industry for 6 or 7 years now, and when I first started polling, I was polling because I was a male stripper, and I was dancing in a bar that had poles, and that's how I started learning pole. I got on YouTube and I found Josiah Grant and a lot of other guys who were doing pole, and that's what plugged me into this industry, this bubble of an industry that we all, refer to. When I was at home in Virginia, there were 3 pole studios, and I went and I called if I could take a class, and none of the studios would allow me to take a class. And they said if I wanted to have a private pole lesson, I could set up a private lesson, and they basically upcharged me by like 3 or 4 times the regular price that they were selling their private lessons for. So the discrimination against men in this industry, over the past 3 years, even over the past 2 years, we've seen such an influx of people into this industry, and a lot of people are coming to it now who see us sharing posts of like all of these great, amazing male pole dancers and male artists and these male gymnasts who are doing pole. That's what they see entering in the pole community now, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't like this 5 years ago. It wasn't this open. Matter of fact, only within the past 4 years or so have there even been male divisions in competitions. But my beef has always been that men should be able to participate in pole classes and that it should be open. I don't understand, and I understand the reasoning for it. I don't understand the reason for female-only gyms. I realize that the idea, the big idea, the concept behind it is so that women can go to the gym, like even whatever, Anytime Fitness or whatever they call them, can go to the gym and they can work out, and they can work out freely without feeling like they're going to be looked at by men who are working out. But the question is that really good? Like, is that really helping us? Is that a feminist attitude to have? Is it really helping women to perpetuate the stereotype that they're frail, they're weak, they can't stand up for themselves, they can't be strong, that men are predators, and they have to shelter themselves away from men in a gym situation in order to work out? I think women-only gyms and women-only pole studios only continue to perpetuate the problems that are so systemic in this industry. That's just my opinion. I understand why people make those rules, but at the same time, it really doesn't help anybody. It doesn't move us forward. I would like to see the day when you go to Body and Pole in New York City, and yes, it's New York City, and it's not, it's New York City and not Mississippi or something. You go into Body and Pole and you see tons of men and tons of women taking tons of aerial classes and pole classes together, and there's no division between men and women and or who's working hard to achieve their positions. I'm waiting for the day nationally that people will be able to embrace and follow that business model of having classes, but that's far off.
Okay. Lux or Colleen, did you have anything to add to this conversation topic? We will be wrapping it up shortly.
I can add, my husband and I, we run a workshop together that we call Sadie Hawkins Day, a play off of the idea where a girl would ask a boy to a dance, and in this case to a pole class. We just hosted our 4th class the last week, and for us it's a really great way to introduce often the husband or boyfriend in sort of a traditional heterosexual relationship to see a different side of pole. And I do think that the more we can continue to educate, as I mentioned earlier, our internal community about creating safe spaces, not just physically safe, but also in that safe emotional space, which is to what Philip is saying might be some of the drivers behind some of these female-only spaces and might be why Ben has run into these issues. And I know other male polars have had them as well. In the studios I've worked in, they've always been co-ed. We get a smattering of men, and the most that I see is when they do come to my Sadie Hawkins Day workshop, and to a single man, they have a great time. They have fun. It becomes a bonding experience with their partner, and I think it would be great if we had certainly as much diversity as possible in the pole community. That's what I love, is seeing everybody come and everybody have a great time.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And Lux, did you have anything to contribute to the question from Ben?
Okay, I'll just say something real quick. I'm all for diversity. However, I think it's okay for women to have pole studios that are just for women sometimes. I think women are entitled to that safe space. And I will say this, there's certainly been plenty of places now and historically that are only for men. So I think, every once in a while, it can be good and totally okay for women to have those spaces. Now, do I want dudes in pole? Absolutely. Do I want access to women-only spaces sometimes? Yeah, I want that too.
Cool. All right, thank you, Lux. So we are going to wrap up our webinar. Thank you so much to all the panelists, and thank you to everyone that watched and wrote in questions and comments. If you are watching this webinar after it is live, please feel free to comment or send us an email at info@unitedpoleartists.com. Tell us what your thoughts are on this webinar and these discussion topics. We are always looking for new discussion topics as well. We love a healthy debate. We love a healthy discussion. And we hope that this has been a positive experience for everyone involved. So thanks again to our panelists and everyone that viewed this webinar. We hope to see you too, and we all hope that you are always united by pole. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day.